Did you know, the iconic sound made by the elites in the original Halo is actually a slowed down and reversed sound clip of Sergeant Johnson shouting, "No, no, no!" Not only this, but the elite's speech in general is Johnson's dialogue slowed down by about 25% and played in reverse. Here are a few examples.
Don't even try it, soldier.
Halo has some interesting secrets within it, but its history is just as compelling. Though largely known for creating the Halo franchise, Bungie released 9 games prior to Halo Combat Evolved, 3 of which are Mac exclusives, and Bungie's main 2 franchises, Marathon and Myth, sold well on the platform. They were well received by Mac gamers, making it crucial that subsequent games released on the Mac. Halo Combat Evolved was first revealed during the Macworld conference by Jason Jones sharing the stage with Steve Jobs. Simply titled Halo, the game was planned to release on Mac and PC at the same time. This was a big deal for Steve Jobs, who reportedly was not a fan of gaming at the time. The game at this point was vastly different from the finished product we know today, but even by the time of its reveal it had changed quite a bit from its original idea. Jones's initial plan for the game was a sci-fi variation on the real-time strategy gameplay of Myth, which told the story of a war on a planet called Solipsis. Plot-wise, the game was always about a single soldier who we now know as the Master Chief. The project's art director, Marcus Leto, was in charge of Master Chief's design. Shikai Wang provided the concept art for the character, but it was deemed too slender, almost effeminate, and was thus beefed up in addition to some other changes. Leto was also responsible for the game's shift to the first-person perspective. Before development of Halo began, Bungie partnered with Take-Two Interactive to publish Myth 2 and Oni, a third-person action game which had just started development. At the same time, Microsoft, who had collaborated with Sega on their Dreamcast console, were looking to enter the console business for themselves. The Xbox project thus began, but Microsoft needed a killer app for the console just as much as they needed the console itself. Roughly 3 months after unveiling the Xbox project to the press, Microsoft bought out Bungie and Halo was confirmed to be an Xbox exclusive. As a result of this, Take-Two ended their partnership with Bungie, taking the rights to Myth and Oni with them. During Halo's first European press tour, the demo computer hosting the game literally blew up with smoke pouring out of the machine. Lead writer and cinematic director Joe Staten said, "Having no computer made our first demo go, poorly. Imagine, if you will, there's this green guy called Master Chief and he's fighting against some purple space aliens called the Covenant. Cool, huh?" Halo Combat Evolved went on to sell over 6.4 million copies. There hasn't been a lot of information regarding the actual acquisition of Bungie and what that process was like, so we sought out former Microsoft General Manager Stuart Mulder to shed some light on the event. According to him, while Microsoft had great IPs in the form of Age of Empires and Flight Simulator, they felt neither series would make for quality console launch titles. Halo seemed to fit that bill, but Bungie wasn't going to just walk into Microsoft's ownership. At the time of the buyout, Bungie was struggling financially, so the money was much needed, but the staff at Bungie weren't too thrilled with the idea of having a parent company. While other Microsoft employees worked on the numbers side of the deal, Mulder was in charge of pitching the idea of working with Microsoft to everyone at Bungie. Microsoft wanted Bungie to be assured that they would retain their identity as a creative studio. Bungie was approached from the top down, with its founders first being assured that Microsoft would provide creative freedom, then other teams and individuals in Bungie. Beyond that, Bungie didn't want to work in the typical Microsoft environment where employees each had an office. They wanted a bullpen, an open space which promoted creativity and community. Microsoft not only provided them this space inside their own building complete with a living room simulator where they could enjoy the game in an environment similar to that of their customers, but their area was partitioned off and had its own security staff, and very few people from Microsoft could visit freely. This was so they wouldn't feel as though they'd been assimilated by the Borg. Though this did not stop Microsoft's marketing department from changing the name of the game from Halo to Halo Combat Evolved. This was allegedly done to better compete with other military-themed shooters. Throughout their work on the Halo franchise, Bungie pulled several ideas and features from their previous projects. Their first shooter, Marathon, follows a nameless cyborg security officer wearing Mjolnir Mark IV armor during an alien attack on the UESC Marathon. In Halo Combat Evolved, the Master Chief's armor is referred to as Mjolnir Mark V armor, despite the two games being entirely unrelated narratively. The two armor sets are also completely unrelated. Mjolnir Mark IV armor as it exists in the Halo universe is worn by the Spartans in Halo Wars. Fond of their origins, Bungie included a proper reference to the original Marathon armor in Halo 3 in the form of the security helmet and shoulder armor variants. They returned in Halo Reach but weren't nearly as close to the original Marathon designs. Marathon also included Forge and Anvil, level editors that gave players access to the game designer's tools. Halo 3 introduced Forge Mode, a mode which allowed players to place and rearrange objects, weapons, and vehicles to their liking, the menu icon for which is an anvil. The cooperative campaign mode featured in Halo Combat Evolved had also been done prior in Marathon 2 Durandal. It doesn't stop there. In Halo 2 and 3, Master Chief was able to dual-wield weapons, a feature originally included in Marathon. While Halo wasn't able to take its multiplayer online until Halo 2 with the help of Xbox Live, Bungie's real-time strategy game Myth, released 7 years earlier, was one of the first Mac games to be playable over a network via Apple Talk. When Jones was first starting work on Halo, he initially codenamed the project Monkey Nuts, but later changed it to Blam, as he couldn't bring himself to say the codename in front of his mother. Along with the Forge mode, Halo 3 implemented a file share system which allowed users to make custom maps, modes, screenshots, and game clips available to the public. To cut down on the use of profanity on this service, using obscenities in titles or descriptions would result in the message being censored and replaced with Blam. This is most likely a nod to Jones's codename predicament. Cortana, the AI who accompanies Master Chief throughout the Halo games, made her debut through a series of emails sent to a very popular Marathon fan site. The emails were sent from a Cortana@Bungie.com, but are allegedly penned by Bungie staffer Nathan Bittner. While cryptic, the content of the emails didn't specifically point to the plot of the upcoming Halo game, nor Cortana's role in that story. As such, they're only considered canon where implemented in the actual games, such as in the announcement trailer for Halo 3.
This is the way the world ends.
Quite a few weapons were made for the third-person version of Halo that didn't make the cut for Halo Combat Evolved. That said, some were featured in later games. The flamethrower made it into Halo CE PC Edition, but wouldn't be featured in a console game until Halo 3. The Covenant Sniper, as it is referred to by the developers commentating over the footage, was most likely converted into the beam rifle which saw use in Halo 2 and 3. Halo 2 and the upcoming Halo 5 feature the submachine gun, or SMG, and while it wasn't an equipable weapon, the chain gun was featured in Halo 3 in the form of removable turrets. Some weapons that didn't make the cut were the anti-air rocket launcher and machete, though certain versions of the double-barreled rocket launcher are able to lock on to flying vehicles. The spear gun, which was supposed to be used against sea creatures, and the gravity wrench don't appear to have any contemporaries in existing Halo games. There were also a couple of cut vehicles from Halo Combat Evolved. Before the series' iconic Warthog was implemented, Bungie designed a vehicle for the game based on the Hummer. Also cut during development was an early version of the Covenant Spectre. It appeared in the E3 2000 trailer but was apparently cut from the final version. The Spectre instead showed up in Halo 2. Halo Combat Evolved shipped with 10 playable campaign missions, but Bungie originally planned for 25. This was likely due to the graphical and perspective overhaul from the original third-person product for the Mac and PC to the first-person shooter made specifically for the Xbox. The game was originally planned to have a weather system and indigenous life forms to fill out the world of Halo, but both were scrapped during development. This same screenshot and caption from PC Gamer magazine suggests that Pelicans would be pilotable in the multiplayer, but this was never confirmed and isn't featured in the final game. Speaking of multiplayer, as Xbox Live wouldn't be ready by the time the Xbox launched, Halo Combat Evolved shipped with only split-screen and system-linked multiplayer. According to Bungie, they never really thought that people would do a lot of playing Xbox multiplayer on LAN. But this may be due to the fact that the multiplayer didn't work until just 5 weeks before the game launched. Did you know? The original plans for Halo 2's single-player campaign were about the size of Halo 2 and Halo 3 combined. After coming back from E3 2003, however, Bungie realized that putting a game of that scope on the Xbox was impossible. Halo 2 was revealed at E3 2002 via a 2.5-minute teaser trailer, but the actual game wouldn't be seen until the following year during E3. Although, technically, that demo wasn't the actual game either. The 9-minute demo was played live on stage during Microsoft's press event, but it was heavily scripted. During an interview with IGN at E3 2014, Frank O'Connor, franchise director at 343 Industries, said, "If you deviate from the safe, bug-tested areas in any way, it immediately and instantly crashes." While most of the new gameplay implementations shown in the demo were included in Halo 2's actual release, the demo scene and script were scrapped. In fact, shortly after E3 2003, Bungie scrapped the entire graphical engine on which the demo was running. According to Halo 2's multiplayer designer Chris Carney, even that whole environment, the Earth City, was way too big for the engine at the time. We ended up cutting out huge parts of geometry from that level, so you never actually saw that. The level Quarantine Zone in Halo 2's campaign, considered to be one of the longest in the entire franchise, is the remaining 20% of what was once a giant level, the entirety of which was built before having to be cut down. Despite all the cuts, Bungie was still unable to fit everything into the campaign and thus settled on the ending featured in Halo 2. The cliffhanger wasn't part of the plan, and yes, overambition was absolutely the cause, claims Joseph Staten, writer for the Halo franchise. Despite the rushed nature of the development period, Halo 2 sold 8.49 million copies. One of the biggest draws to Halo 2 was its Xbox Live-enabled multiplayer, now a staple inclusion in every Halo game. When talking about cuts made to the multiplayer, Carney mentions that at least 2 months worth of work was put into creating a bigger style of objective-based game. Environments were built to support it, but it didn't make it far before it was scrapped in favor of sticking with their already polished game types and variants. However, Halo 2 featured the ability not only to create custom game types, but to publicly host them online. One of the most popular game modes to come out of the community was called Zombie, although sometimes it was referred to as Pandemic or Dawn of the Dead. In Zombie, a small team of players would be the zombies wielding only an energy sword, while a much larger team of players would be the humans wielding shotguns and pistols, and neither team had shields. Every time a human died, they'd switch over to the zombie team. The point was to last for as long as possible. If this sounds familiar, that's because Bungie made an official version of this game type called Infection in Halo 3, which became Flood in Halo 4. As of right now, it's unclear from whom or how Zombie originated, but that's not the case with the second community game type to be officially included in a Halo game, Griffball. Halo 3's map pack included the map Foundry, a box-like map designed to be heavily customizable in Forge mode. Rooster Teeth Productions, the creators of Halo-based web series Red vs. Blue, created a pre-release PSA video for the map pack called Red vs. Blue DIY. When talking about the creation of Griffball, Bernie Burns, who's written and directed most of Red vs. Blue, explained that there was an extended version of the script that had Donut and Griff making forge creations on Foundry to go along with Simmons' railgun invention. Griff's invention was going to be the laziest game type possible, where you basically walk into the middle of the room, pick up a flag, and plant it 2 feet away. That scene really wasn't that funny, so it was cut, but I had already made the game type. I started messing around with it while we were uploading the video. Griffball is a relatively simple game. 2 teams of 4 players wielding gravity hammers and energy swords start on opposite sides of a room and run at the bomb in an effort to score it on the opposing team's goal. Griffball is a variant of the Assault game type, and since the bomb arming timer is set to instant, all any team has to do is navigate their way to the arming pad to score. The game type was originally going to be called Rugby, but was changed to Griffball by achievement hunters Gavin Free. The name Griffball comes from a scene in an episode of Red vs. Blue when Sarge announces,
"This is the best game since Griffball!"
after taking pot shots at Griff with a sniper rifle. Since Griff's armor is orange, the ball carrier in a game of Griffball has their armor color force changed to orange so that when they're inevitably killed, Griff dies. After gaining popularity through Rooster Teeth's Griffball miniseries as well as regularly scheduled League play, Bungie temporarily included the game type on a double EXP weekend matchmaking hopper in Halo 3. In Halo Reach matchmaking, there was an official mode complete with unique announcer voiceover to start the match, but Griffball was still considered a Forge community game type. In Halo 4, Griffball finally became its own game type and featured new gameplay mechanics such as passing and ball interactivity, and its own map. Not only that, but in Episode 5, Chapter 5 of Halo 4's Spartan Ops mode, there is a Griffball-themed Easter egg hidden near the intro to the level. Throughout the Halo series, there are several Red vs. Blue related Easter eggs. In Halo 2, on the multiplayer map Turf, there are a couple of vending machines inside a large garage featuring Rooster Teeth's logos. In Halo 3's single-player campaign mission, Crow's Nest, it's possible to stumble upon a Marine knocking on a door, arguing with another Marine on the other side asking for a password.
Not supposed to let anyone in without it.
If the staff meeting just ended, no one outside is gonna know the freaking password. Now open up!
Depending on what difficulty you're playing the mission on, the Marines will be voiced by different members of the Red vs. Blue voice cast and reference different lines from the show. In Halo 3, Halo 3 ODST, and Halo Reach, the Warthog's tires have the word Puma inscribed on them. This is a reference to a line in the second episode when Griff says the Warthog looks more like a puma than an actual warthog. The Halo 4 achievements I Heart Red vs. Blue, granted for winning 5 Wargames matches, and Roses vs. Violet for finding a Red vs. Blue Easter egg in Spartan Ops, of which there are 10, are both references to the show as well. In the months approaching Halo 2's launch, those eager to get their hands on the game were able to demo the multiplayer by participating in an alternate reality game. On July 23, 2004, Microsoft launched a theatrical trailer for Halo 2 to build hype for the multiplayer reveal at E3. The final screen of the trailer had a URL which at first pointed to Xbox.com, but would momentarily switch to ilovebees.com and then back. At first, the website seemed to be a personal collection blog for beekeeping enthusiasts, but shortly after visiting, the front page would appear as though it were being hacked in real time. The corrupted page displays a series of countdowns which culminated in a message reading, "Wide awake and physical." Upon reaching the final countdown on August 24th, the site began a daily routine of displaying locations of payphones for participants to call in from, and updating with what pieces of information had been recovered by players. By providing the correct information to the operator at the payphone, the player received what was referred to as an axon. The axons were short audio recordings which, when compiled together, provided background information on the Halo universe in the form of a radio drama. At certain milestones in the game's progress, instead of getting an audio recording, voice actors from the actual radio serial would talk directly to the players. In one incident, a player called in the middle of Hurricane Ivan, and one of the operators broke character and said, "Dude, it's a hurricane. Put the phone down." Did you know? Much of the technology and organisms of the Halo universe relate to real-life science with varying degrees of real-world functionality and similarity. The titular Halo ring worlds featured throughout the franchise would be extremely complicated structures not only to build, but to position and interact with as they are in the games. In an article on Gamma Sutra, planetary physicist Kevin Grazer examined the Halo constructs. Grazer specifically examined Installation 04, or Alpha Halo, the setting of Halo Combat Evolved, under heavy scrutiny and came to several conclusions. Through a series of calculations, Grazer reasoned that Alpha Halo weighed somewhere around 1,700 million billion kilograms, about 187,000 billion US tons. With this in mind, and considering that some of the materials which comprise the Halo ring are undefined, it would likely take just over the entire mass of the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter to construct a single Halo. On top of that, there were originally 18 Halos, 12 of which were 30,000 kilometers in diameter, 3 times the diameter of the reduced-sized Halos such as Alpha Halo. Due to the Halo's location in orbit around the gas giant named Threshold, a lot of necessary functions and events currently unspecified by the games themselves can be deduced. Threshold is uncharacteristically devoid of moons, possessing only one moon, Basis. Gas giants in our own solar system, such as Jupiter, possess around 67 moons, and Saturn has about 62 moons. Given that Alpha Halo is as massive as it is, it's likely that some of the moons that should exist were used to build the ring. Since Alpha Halo is over 100,000 years old, it's more likely that the Forerunners who built it found a way to clear debris from Threshold's system entirely. Elsewise, the Halo would have likely been destroyed by a major meteoroid impact by the time of the events in the games. In fact, Installation 00, also known as the Ark, possesses an extremely large foundry at its core which was used to build the Halos, as noted by the events at the end of Halo 3. At the center of this foundry are the remnants of a planetoid which had been strip-mined by the Forerunners for years to supply raw materials. It's implied that it's not the first planet to be used by the Forerunners in this nature. Alpha Halo has loosely been indicated to be in orbit almost halfway between threshold and basis at what's known as a Lagrange point. This proximity to threshold would result in a massive amount of radiation exposure. To counteract this, it's possible that conductive cables running along the circumference of the halo could generate just the right amount of a magnetic field to protect the facility without interrupting its electronics. Also, based on Alpha Halo's orbit between threshold and basis and its orientation in said orbit, it's likely that the entire surface goes dark at least once per 24 hours. Speaking of time passing, in order to maintain simulated gravity with centrifugal force, Alpha Halo would have to spin with a tangential speed of just over 7 kilometers per second. This speed would have a noticeable effect on projectiles such as those fired from a Scorpion tank or rocket launcher over long distances. This rotation speed also means that any ship attempting to land on the surface of the halo from inside the ring's airspace would have to match the landing speed of 15,660 miles per hour. Since halos contain atmosphere, should a landing ship fail to account for this speed, it would come into contact with air friction at supersonic speeds and most likely burn up instantaneously. The halo rings in question were created for one specific purpose: to eradicate the flood from within the Milky Way galaxy should they become too great a threat for the Forerunners to handle. The flood, which began as the revival of an abandoned concept for Marathon 2 Durandal called the fungal zombie, possess extremely powerful neural dominance as a parasite, so much so that they're beyond the realm of any parasites currently known to science. However, many of their behaviors and abilities are exhibited in parasites that do exist. As a primer on the flood, they are parasites in the strictest form of the term. Without a host, they cannot exist, pure forms notwithstanding. The Flood are the remnants of an extremely advanced civilization known as the Precursors, and in the form they've assumed, they seek out all sentient life and assimilate them into their central consciousness via rapid infection and transformation. While we've covered cordyceps in previous Did You Know Gaming episodes, another parasite which alters its host physiology for its own benefit is the Leucochloridium paradoxum, commonly referred to as the green-banded broodsac. According to Andrew Vogt, a postdoctoral fellow studying at Queen Mary's University of London, the green-banded broodsack's predisposition as a parasite is to infect a snail, then a bird, and then back to a different snail. Since birds don't traditionally eat snails, the parasite alters the natural behaviors of the snail, forcing it to make its way up into trees, thus making it slightly more convenient for birds to prey on. The parasite grows into a caterpillar-colored broodsac within the snail, which physically alters the snail to look more like a caterpillar, and thus more appealing to birds. The Flood also alter the physiology of their host to suit their survival needs, which includes growing giant tentacles and tendrils for greater combat potential. Most notably, however, they are a neural-based infection, so altering the mind of their host is precisely what they do. In many documented cases, they've convinced their hosts to circumvent combat in order to infect densely populated areas, such as when the Gravemind crashes the UNSC in amber clad into High Charity in Halo 2. Since the Flood all belong to one collective consciousness, they grow more intelligent with each life form they infect. As a result of this, they begin to shed biomass, which is a collection of the Flood supercells they're composed of. This biomass can eventually form into Graveminds, which are essentially organic supercomputers. This behavior in the Flood seems similar to a hive mind, where each individual organism of an organization works towards the same goal with the same motivation, instructions, and consciousness, but so far unified consciousness across all organisms of a species hasn't been documented. There is such a thing as swarm intelligence, which is present in Earth organisms such as ants, but this is entirely different. Swarm intelligence is more akin to the Covenant Hunter, which is composed of thousands of tiny worm-like organisms called Lekgolo, who behave with simulated sentience exclusively as a group. While unified consciousness doesn't occur in reality, altering the surrounding environment to create more favorable physical conditions for success does. A species of wasp known as Hymenoepimesis argyraphaga infects a specific species of spider and alters its web-building abilities to protect the wasp's own offspring. The spider is forced to create a large web cocoon for the wasp's larvae, which makes the larvae more difficult for predators to get at. In the same way, the Flood creates Graveminds deep within its own territory, surrounded by biomass, which creates a more hazardous environment for predators, such as in the level Cortana towards the end of Halo 3. Objects such as light bridges or virtually any weapon or shield employed by the Forerunner Prometheans seen in Halo 4 and 5 are composed of hard light. Within the Halo universe, hard light has not been fully explained and is only known to combine high-energy light and gas particles. However, scientists in the real world have been making strides to turn light into something physical. In September of 2013, scientists from Harvard University and MIT were able to coax photons into bonding together, a phenomenon previously thought impossible. According to Mikhail Lukin, leader on the project, what we have done is create a special type of medium in which photons interact with each other so strongly that they begin to act as though they have mass and they bind together to form molecules. This type of photonic bound state has been discussed theoretically for quite a while, but until now it hadn't been observed. It's not an inapt analogy to compare this to lightsabers. Theoretically, depending on how the molecules work together, this process could lead to structures composed entirely of what essentially is hard light. On the subject of lightsabers, one of the most iconic and lethal weapons in the Halo universe is the Energy Sword. It's typically used by the Sangheili, who are the Covenant's elites. This sword is so important to the Sangheili that anyone who knows how to wield one in their society can breed with any female they want. While it hasn't been done to the scale or function of Halo's Energy Sword, confining superheated plasma to a specific shape is entirely possible. The sword is a relatively simple device. The hilt houses magnetic generators which force the sword into a curved shape, and a projector that casts the superheated plasma into said shape, along with a battery. Plasma shaping, as it is now, however, requires electromagnets to surround the plasma and thus create the desired shape. One device capable of accomplishing this is a tokamak. Tokamaks create a sustained fusion reaction by manipulating the charged particles inherent in plasma, thus forcing it to move constantly and create what appears to be the shape of a torus, much like an inner tube. So, unfortunately, while plasma can be shaped, it can't be sustainably shaped free of its electromagnetic restraints as of yet, but it can be shaped and launched through the air. Researchers at the University of Missouri devised a way to launch rings of plasma roughly 2 feet in open air. They did this without using electromagnets to sustain its shape, as the launched plasma ring creates its own magnetic field. Granted, plasma weapons in Halo have a range far greater than 2 feet, but it's certainly a start. Halo Reach introduced jetpacks to the franchise for the first time, despite the game taking place first in the chronology and several of the subsequent games lacking jetpacks. Jetpack technology has come a long way since Halo's inception, and we're easily capable of propelling humans of average weight with current technology. However, Spartans wear armor that, when combined with their own weight, brings them up to roughly 1,000 pounds, the weight of around 6 to 8 people. According to Nino Amarina, CEO of jetpack manufacturer Thunderbolt Aerosystems, building a rocket motor which could lift 1,000 pounds is possible, provided the wearers shoulder the weight of the fuel and pack as well, something Master Chief would likely have very little trouble with. Cortana is what's known in the Halo universe as a smart AI. Smart AIs are developed by recreating the neural pathways of an actual human's brain and affixing them to some rather complicated software called a Riemann matrix. This software grants the smart AI something extremely close to human intuition, which they can use to learn from an unlimited breadth of topics. After roughly 7 years of acquiring knowledge and fastening new neural linkages within their processing matrix, the data becomes too dense. Essentially, this either causes something similar to short-circuiting, or the AI will begin severing neural linkages in a self-preserving act referred to as rampancy. This causes the AI to make increasingly poor decisions regarding which neural linkages to sever, which, ironically, eventually leads to their death. While actual artificial intelligence at this level of complexity is far from being created, AIs which have cognitive learning abilities that comprehend and retain information they decide is relevant do exist. An AI which understands the structures which limit its data acquisition can use that knowledge to convince its handlers to expand those limiting structures so long as it's within its instructions and prescribed functionality. The subject of self-preservation in AI is a topic of severe debate, but this process does appear to share some similarity with how smart AI deal with rampancy. Nick Bostrom, professor of philosophy at Oxford University, states in his scientific journal, Ethical Issues in Advanced Artificial Intelligence, even a fettered superintelligence that was running on an isolated computer able to interact with the rest of the world only via a text interface might be able to break out of its confinement by persuading its handlers to release it.
Hello and welcome to Did You Know Gaming Extra. In this episode we'll be looking at trivia from a variety of original Xbox titles. With the Xbox, we saw Microsoft kicking down the doors to the console race and barging right in. The console released in 2001 and was the only console on offer from an American company since the failure of Atari's Jaguar. The console's online services were unrivaled at the time, beating the Dreamcast and PS2's offerings with features that would become staples today, such as friends lists and massively popular online games such as Halo 2. Halo 2 was actually the best-selling game on the console, with 8.5 million copies sold, 2 million more than its predecessor Halo Combat Evolved, which is also the second best-selling game on the console. While Halo 2 received a port to Windows PC, it wouldn't come for a few years after the original release. The port was delayed due to a hidden image within the game's data. Originally expected on May 8, 2007, the game was pushed back to May 31st after the discovery of partial nudity within the game's map editor. Microsoft told media outlet Next Gen, "It has come to our attention that an unfortunate obscure content error which includes partial nudity was included in our initial production of Halo 2 for Windows Vista. As such, we have updated the initial game's packaging at retailers with a label so customers are aware before purchasing the game. Additionally, we've developed an online update which can be downloaded from www.halo2.com to remove the content." At Microsoft, we take the Entertainment Software Ratings Board guidelines very seriously and hold ourselves to high standards, with our customers always in mind. The image was part of an error message known as a .as error. When triggered, an image of a man mooning would be displayed, a big problem for the company as this wasn't taken into account with the game's content descriptors. As such, Microsoft added a sticker to the initial shipments of the game to include a partial nudity warning on the top of their already M-rated game's descriptors for blood, language, and violence. After several years, Polygon would unravel how this came to be. During the development of Halo 2, Master Chief Executive of Microsoft, Steve Ballmer, had shown up to visit the studio. The staff were all somewhat scared of Ballmer, though one of the studio's lead engineers, Charlie Goff, waited for the perfect moment to secretly moon Ballmer and have somebody capture the moment on camera. Goff was quick in his actions, and thus Ballmer had no idea the event even happened. This picture was sent around Bungie Studios, with prints even showing up around Microsoft's Millennium campus, with only Bungie staff being aware of its origins. One of the developer's proprietary file formats for 3D asset files was a .as file. When these files caused issues in the game's engine, a .as error message would crop up. This image was added at some point as a light gag around the office, but it ended up being buried into Halo 2's PC release. The odds of it being found were slim, but it had been discovered around the same time as the GTA hot coffee scandal coming to light, causing major concern. While nobody at Bungie lost their job over the ordeal, it's believed that some staff at Microsoft itself did. And while there's no certainty on how much this butt cost the company, rumors say that it was upwards of $500,000, though this figure has never been confirmed. Bungie would split from Microsoft later that same year, though being kept on to create Halo 3 ODST and Reach. Another game which was actually intended to have more mature content was Conker Live and Reloaded. The game ultimately ended up having less mature content than its original version for the Nintendo 64, Conker's Bad Fur Day. The game suffered from heavy censorship, removing even the most minor of obscenities from the original release. This even caused the team to rename the game to Live and Reloaded, as opposed to its original name, Live and Uncut. For this remake, Rare wanted to replace the character of Bert the Metal Crate. Bert guards a pen of cheese wedges from Marvin the Mouse. They wanted to replace him with a personified gate named Bill, who would complain about how all the windows in the barn were being broken and wouldn't work anymore, and how the barn would continuously crash. A clear joke at the expense of Bill Gates and Windows' notorious nature for being unreliable software. This was denied by Microsoft, and nobody was surprised. A direct sequel to Live and Reloaded was planned for the Xbox, known as Conker Getting Medieval, but this was ultimately cancelled. The title would have followed the character of Death and been set in medieval times, with Conker being involved as more of a guest role. It was intended to have a focus on multiplayer and make use of the Xbox Live service with online play. While Halo 2 was briefly delayed and it was decided for Conker to have offending content stripped, one game for the system was pulled entirely. Kakuto Chojin Back Alley Brutal. A notorious sample had been used in the game's soundtrack, which first appeared in Cruisin' World and even The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. The sample was of an Islamic chant, used in the track Love-Hate Chant, the theme for the character Assad. Soon after the game's release, controversy had ensued, resulting in the game's removal from store shelves. The reason this chant had continually appeared in game soundtracks was because of its inclusion in a sound library called Voice Spectral Volume 1, released by Best Service. ToeJam and Earl 3 Mission to Earth also had some changes made before the game's release. For a start, the game was originally intended to be called ToeJam and Earl All Funked Up, though this was changed because of concerns that it was inappropriate. That said, the game does still contain this original name in its ending, where posters in the background still have this title. This wasn't the only change, however. The original version that Sega sent out for review differed from the retail release, specifically in the character of the anti-funk. In the retail version of ToeJam and Earl 3, the character was simply a floating skull, but the original game featured what could be described as a floating head of a Ku Klux Klan member. Speaking on the change, Greg Johnson told Xbox Nation, "It was to Sega's tremendous credit, and I have to just give them some applause, that they were willing to step into the arena at all when it comes to racial types of stuff. We created a game that was very heartfelt for me, being half black and half white. And one of my missions is to bring cultural diversity to our industry, to young people, through games. ToeJam and Earl and Letitia, there's no question that they're black. Urban black, yo, what's up? That's what they're all about. And Sega was willing to go for it, and they said, okay, we get that, it's a good message, we know it's risky, but we're going to stand behind it. So I love that. But that one, the anti-funk, sort of went just a little too far over the line for them. When I was doing it, it was actually an accident. We had done a bunch of designs for the anti-funk, and the artist had done this unintentionally. I looked at it and said, wow, that's funny, that looks like a Ku Klux Klan hat. And then I thought about it for a second, and I said, well hey, what's a better villain for these black characters who are spreading the funk and the love and this kind of oblique reference? Because it wasn't obvious, it was open to interpretation. In the game's final release, Letitia is voiced by Sherry Jackson, though another voice was originally considered. The team came close to signing singer Lisa Lopez, aka Left Eye, one of the 3 members of the girl group TLC. The team was close to signing the artist, having worked out all the necessities with her manager and agents. At the last minute, however, Lopez had apparently got a new agent, requiring double all of the amounts previously agreed upon. As a result, the role was passed on. Another interesting voice role came from Zack in Dead or Alive. Originally created for the first entry in the series, Zack is an eccentric Muay Thai boxer, fighting only for money and fame. This design was based on that of professional basketball player Dennis Rodman, or more specifically, his appearance in the 1996 film Double Team. With the release of Xbox exclusive Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball, the character was given an even more prominent role within the series, with the game's events all taking place on Zack Island. It would be at this point that Dennis Rodman would not just be the basis for the character, but also the voice in the title's English release.
Later, baby. I'm out of here, honey.
Microsoft had a tough time competing in the gaming market with their new console, facing up against Sony's PlayStation 2 and Nintendo's GameCube, 2 highly reputable systems with excellent first-party titles. One Xbox exclusive from Rare was Grabbed by the Ghoulies, named after the act of grabbing somebody by their scrotum. This title wasn't always planned for Xbox, however, having originally been created with the GameCube in mind. After Microsoft bought Rare in order to compete in the console war, the game was quickly reworked for their system. Another popular title for the system was Ninja Gaiden, created by Tecmo. To find out which console fans would like to see the game appear on, the company held a poll on their website, giving the vote to the audience. The game ultimately became an Xbox exclusive, however most fans had actually voted for the GameCube. Microsoft wanted to have their own mascot for the system, and before Master Chief had fallen into that role, another character was groomed to be the face of Xbox. Initially created to compete against other console staples such as Nintendo's Mario and Sony's Crash Bandicoot, Blinx The Time Sweeper released in 2002 and saw players take on the role of a time-traveling, vacuum-wielding kitty cat. While also receiving a sequel in 2004, Microsoft had decided to drop the character's trademark entirely in 2015, as it seems Blinx didn't quite resonate with the gaming audience as they had hoped. A game that did resonate with fans, however, released for Xbox Live Arcade on the Xbox 360 in the form of Geometry Wars. While the game was seen as a breakout title that demonstrated the true value of the Xbox Live Arcade, this wasn't the game's first appearance. In Project Gotham Racing 2 for the original Xbox, it was possible to see the player's usable cards in a virtual garage. In this area, the player could even walk around. This would allow them to find an innocuous arcade machine off to one side, which when used would boot up Geometry Wars. This was of course before it became its own franchise entirely.
Did you know? The first Xbox prototypes were built using parts from Dell laptops. Members of the Xbox team ordered a few Dell laptops, dismantled them, and built the first prototypes of a Windows gaming console. The Xbox was originally going to be named the DirectX box, as it was born of Microsoft's DirectX technology. For decades, Microsoft's business was focused around the Windows PC operating system, and their involvement in game development was limited to the PC. Leading up to the release of Windows 95, 3 Microsoft employees, Craig Eisler, Eric Engstrom, and Alex St. John, put together DirectX. DirectX allowed 3D games to run on computers without having to create versions for each possible graphics card. However, due to the popularity of MS-DOS at the time, game programmers were skeptical that DirectX would be the future of PC game development. To help get the industry on board, St. John put on several industry parties. One of the most notable was at the 1996 Computer Game Developers Conference. The event was strongly Roman-themed, so strong that there were live lions and people were wearing togas. While it's unclear what that had to do with DirectX, Microsoft unveiled Direct 3D and Direct Play with MechWarrior 2 at that event. DirectX became the standard on Windows PCs and allowed their games to keep up with the 3D graphics present on consoles like Sony's PlayStation. Microsoft's then CEO, Bill Gates, approached Sony's CEO, Nobuyuki Ide, about using Microsoft's programming tools for the PlayStation 2, but Ide declined. According to Ide, Gates appeared to take it personally and was visibly upset. The PS2 was unveiled as a console that could do much more than just play video games. Gates saw this as a threat to the PC market and decided Microsoft needed a more direct answer to it. A small team within Microsoft put together a console prototype based on DirectX. The console was secretly, and inappropriately, codenamed Midway after the famous World War II battle which ended in a decisive American triumph over the Japanese. Former physicist Seamus Blackley and former game developer Kevin Backus focused on attracting game developers when discussing the Xbox's design. WebTV, a home appliance company acquired by Microsoft while the Xbox team was still growing in numbers, proposed a different approach to home console gaming. They wanted to start with an appliance and graduate into gaming, rather than starting at a PC and simplifying it. Gates eventually sided with the Xbox team, noting that it made sense to start with PC technology, where Microsoft had plenty of experience. Regarding how the Xbox was pitched to game developers, DirectX graphics expert Otto Burks said the existing consoles were hardware-centric. Here's a chunk of hardware, now go figure out how to write some games. The existing software tools and development environment were primitive at best. A key principle behind the Xbox was to put the developer and content creation first. To achieve this, the Xbox operating system needed to be built around playing games as best it possibly could. Microsoft had tried their hands at implementing a version of Windows CE for the Sega Dreamcast, but it went widely underused as it just wasn't good enough at running games. A number of high-profile parts went into the creation of the Xbox and established its presence in the market. The system features an Ethernet port for high-speed broadband internet rather than a dial-up modem. The Xbox's size is due in part to the inclusion of the power supply within the box rather than outside attached to the power cord. A hard drive was built into the system, which was one of the Xbox's defining features. Lastly, the Xbox was the first gaming console to feature live audio in Dolby 5.1 surround, rather than just during pre-rendered cutscenes, an ability the Xbox's killer app, Halo Combat Evolved, specifically took advantage of. Designer Horace Luke claimed that green was chosen for the Xbox as it's the signature color of technology, but Blackley had a feeling it was just because it was the only color marker Luke had at the time. The large green orb centered on the Xbox was designed to give off a feeling of exuding nuclear energy, a motif that would eventually be matched by the appearance of the Xbox dashboard. However, the display version of the Xbox was a chrome box in the shape of an X. By the end of its roughly 5-year lifetime, the Xbox had sold over 24 million units. While this pales in comparison to the PlayStation 2's eventual sales of over 155 million, albeit over a much longer period of time, it was enough for Microsoft to make a second console. While Microsoft was able to move units, the console itself was sold at quite the loss. At launch, the Xbox retailed for $299, but the machine cost $425 to make. It's estimated that Microsoft lost $4 billion by the Xbox's 4th year. Japan proved to be the Xbox's worst market by far, having only sold 2 million units there. The Western market had been kind to PC gaming for years, and the Xbox had several PC-related features, but Japan's PC gaming market was nearly non-existent. Ed Fries, then vice president of Microsoft Game Studios, received quite a bit of feedback from Japan regarding the Xbox. Speaking with Eurogamer, Fries explained, "We were told we couldn't call it the Xbox because X is the letter of death. We were told we couldn't make it black because black is the color of death. I was like, isn't the PlayStation black? Rules that apply to you as an outsider don't necessarily apply to insider products. Freese was told that Japanese players wouldn't be used to the dual-stick shooting controls in Halo, and as a result, the Japanese version of the game was dumbed down in that regard. One of the biggest complaints received was about the size and build of the original Xbox controller, affectionately titled the Duke. In response to this, the Xbox Controller S, which was codenamed Akebono after American-born sumo wrestler Akebono Taro, was developed for release in the Japanese market. It would eventually become the console standard. There were a few wins for Microsoft in Japan, and a few devastating losses. In a meeting with Tecmo, Bacchus was frank, declaring a desire to have Ninja Gaiden closely related to the Xbox, rather than explicitly requesting Dead or Alive. Dead or Alive 3 and Ninja Gaiden would eventually launch exclusively on the Xbox as a result of this meeting. Sega announced an 11-game deal for the Xbox, including Panzer Dragoon, Sega GT2, and Jet Grind Radio Future, which was an Xbox launch title in Japan. Around December of 2000, Microsoft had a chance to possibly net the Resident Evil franchise on the Xbox. Rumors arose that series creator Shinji Mikami had grown frustrated with developing for the PS2 after less than a year of working with it. Microsoft's meeting with Mikami was conducted entirely in Japanese, but Microsoft Japan staff was doing the talking for Xbox rather than Bacchus. Mikami asked Microsoft how they feel about games philosophically. The Microsoft Japan staff apparently hadn't heard Bacchus's mantra of games being art and developers artists, and as such were unable to provide an answer. Mikami left the meeting immediately thereafter. This might be what led Resident Evil 4 to being GameCube exclusive for a while, and why it took so long to come to the Xbox. Microsoft also had a chance to host Square's massively multiplayer online RPG Final Fantasy XI on the Xbox. Square wanted a united world where PC and Xbox players could interact, but the Xbox Live team refused. Perhaps due to their loyalty to Sony, Square was unwilling to put a mainline Final Fantasy title on the Xbox, but they were comfortable with Final Fantasy XI. At E3 2003, Freeze set up a major meeting with the sole purpose of discussing Final Fantasy XI with Square, but it didn't go well. I just sat there and watched it fall apart. There was a whole bunch of American attitude at the meeting, and the Japanese did not appreciate it. It was like watching a train wreck. Final Fantasy XI would eventually be released on the Xbox's successor, the Xbox 360.
Hello and welcome to Did You Know Gaming Extra. In this episode, we'll be looking at trivia surrounding a console we're sure you all love, the Xbox One, or, as it's more often called, the Xbone. When it comes to Microsoft and their ventures into the world of gaming, the Xbox One is not exactly considered the shining success that many were expecting. While it's true the system hasn't failed miserably in the sales department, like that of the Wii U, it definitely didn't match up to Microsoft's hopeful expectations as a successor to the overwhelmingly popular Xbox 360. At the time of this video, the Xbox One has only garnered around half the sales of the 360, though granted, the 360 has of course had a longer period in active production. The Xbox One's sales pale dramatically when compared to the likes of Sony's PlayStation 4, in a market that has grown considerably over the years. The Xbox One does come across as a success, however, when compared to the original Xbox, with almost twice as many systems sold. The system does have other merits, such as the technical virtue of being the most powerful home console for its generation with the Xbox One X, as well as the continued updates to improve user feedback on the console's dashboard, and the addition of backwards compatibility with many previous 360 titles. The Xbox One may not have a large volume of exclusive games released for the system, with many titles also releasing for Windows PCs, but there are at least a handful which didn't see a port. One game which remained exclusive to the console for a long time was Insomniac Games' Sunset Overdrive. Insomniac were typically known for developing games on Sony's PlayStation consoles, but with Sunset Overdrive, the company wanted to retain ownership of the game's brand. This led to Drew Murray and Marcus Smith, the game's creative directors, pitching the game to several publishers. They finally landed a deal with Microsoft, with the tech giant agreeing to fund and publish the title. Smith recalled how the duo's main pitch began, claiming that it started off with us cluing into the speaker system in the conference room and playing the sample from the beginning of MC5's Kick Out the Jams, where it's like, "Kick out the jams, not knowing that one of the executives there hates swearing. and then it ended with Drew on top of a chair mimicking how the game was going to play, and the last-minute heroics. It was epic, and I'm shocked they didn't walk away from the table at that point. But for some reason, here we are. Another game that was a console exclusive to the Xbox One for a time was the indie action platformer Cuphead. The game is full of secrets, Easter eggs, and references to other pieces of media. One sly nod to the adventures of Batman and Robin can be found in the boss fight against Werner Vermin. The final phase of the boss fight has players go up against a giant mechanical cat. When the boss is defeated, the face of the cat falls off, just like the mechanical Cheshire Cat boss from Batman and Robin. One series that saw continued releases from the 360 to the Xbox One is Gears of War, or perhaps simply the Gears series. When announcing the 5th entry, Microsoft announced the title as quite plainly Gears 5, dropping the of War portion of its predecessors. Marketing boss at Xbox, Aaron Greenberg, said the team felt that going with Gears 5 alone would be cleaner, and possibly because of the fact most people who refer to the series were already dropping the of War part. One of the alleged reasons for getting more people to adopt the shorter title was because of social media, with Greenberg joking that the move was to save you room on Twitter. That was the whole idea. Of War's absence can also be seen with the 2 spin-off titles announced alongside Gears 5, Gears Tactics and Gears Pop. The game's full title wasn't the only thing being dropped from the franchise though, with the first Xbox One entry of the series also having a change in presentation in another form. After the release of Gears 4, and during the run-up to Gears 5, the title's developers, the Coalition, announced they were working with anti-smoking group Truth Initiative to remove all references to smoking within the game. Coalition boss Rod Ferguson knows full well the devastating impact that smoking can have, having lost his father at the age of 38, when Ferguson himself was only 4. While some voiced upset that the team had effectively censored themselves, Ferguson wanted to reiterate that the decision to cut the game's ties to promoting smoking wasn't a tough one, stating, "Just to clarify, I've always been anti-smoking and have pushed back on having it in Gears since day one. There was no smoking to remove from Gears 4 or 5 because there never was any smoking to begin with. And as long as I'm in control, there never will be. Sorry for the confusion." While many were disappointed with Gears 4 and its general shift in tone, many agree the game did contain some fun Easter eggs. One of these Easter eggs comes from the mouth of fan-favorite character Marcus Phoenix. While exploring Marcus's derelict estate, the player finds a greenhouse filled with tomato plants. After a shootout, if the player proceeds to kill any remaining vines, Phoenix will have a few choice words to share.
How long I've worked on this house alone? You know what it's like being a hermit, fixing a house? There's no Home Depot out here, you assholes. Fucking tomatoes. They my tomatoes up, god damn it! Add that to the fucking list. God damn it! Those are Doms, for Christ's sakes. I grew those from Dom seeds. Fuck! Those are Dom's goddamn seeds, for Christ's sakes. I'm never gonna have a good sauce again. I can't make Dom sauce. Fuck you guys. It's bullshit. Damon Baird, you're a cock!
This Easter egg also makes Dom's Toms available to the player, which are literally tomato grenades. Another Xbox series that, unsurprisingly, saw releases continue on the Xbone is one of Microsoft's biggest franchises, Halo. This franchise also has its fair share of Easter eggs, and one secret in particular, found in Halo 5, requires an extremely high IQ to understand. Within the multiplayer map Riptide, a strange blue box can be found hidden in one of the stage's botanical development pods. On closer inspection, some big brain players noticed that this is actually a Meeseeks box from the wildly popular Adult Swim series Rick and Morty. Halo 5 has other comical Easter eggs, even on its title screen. If players wait on the main menu for about 6.5 minutes, a distressed lone grunt will float across the screen. We all know that Microsoft has made missteps in their time, particularly when it comes to their handling of the developers at Rare. The Rare Replay Collection, exclusive to the Xbox One, received wide praise from fans who wanted to revisit several of Rare's classic titles. Much of the compilation works by emulating the various games created for the multiple consoles over the years, with only minor alterations. And Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, and Perfect Dark simply used their XBLA versions. However, out of all of the titles, only one, technically, had to be remastered to work. Grabbed by the Ghoulies was directly ported to operate using the full technical strength of the Xbox One hardware, recoded to deliver clear upgrades over its earlier OG Xbox version. The original release of Grabbed by the Ghoulies runs in 480p at 30 frames per second, but with Rare Replay, the game is displayed in full HD at 60 frames per second. One of Rare's other recent, more favorable releases is Sea of Thieves, though it hasn't always been smooth sailing for the swashbuckling adventure. It was originally planned for the player to be charged gold as a penalty for dying by the captain of the Ferry of the Damned, having to pay more or less depending on how avoidable death was. While this did not include player versus player deaths, the developers still saw backlash from fans unhappy with the idea of adding insult to injury and potentially alienating new players. In the face of this response, executive producer for the title, Joe Neate, took to Twitter to assure players that they had been heard and that the death tax would not be implemented.